So, the nominations for the 2020 Oscars have been released earlier today, and I wanted to take a little look at what movies have been rewarded. As someone who is a big fan of Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, naturally I am rooting for Scorsese's mob picture, even if I don't care too much for the awards themselves. It's just something that sounds really cool to me, that this great mafia film reunion starring Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci and Harvey Keitel and directed by Scorsese gets showered with awards before all these greats bow out of film for good. And on top of that, I genuinely believe that many of the elements of The Irishman, especially the acting, are Oscar worthy. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, I haven't seen much of the awards films that were released last year. Out of the nominated films, I've only seen The Irishman, Joker, and very recently, yesterday in fact, Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I'll be reviewing in the coming days. So I can't really comment too much when it comes to what films deserve what awards. So it's Todd Phillips' Joker that is leading the Oscar charge, garnering an impressive 11 nominations. It's a very good film. I find it very enjoyable. Although I think it might be a tad bit overrated given that the films it's inspired by, like Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, didn't get as much Oscar love back in the day, despite being better films. But anyway, it's Joker with 11 nominations and then 3 films, The Irishman, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the war film 1917, each with 10 nominations each. So for the film that I was looking out for, The Irishman, in spite of having the Netflix stigma against it, it's achieved massive success with the Academy Awards. Even if it walks away with nothing, like with the Golden Globes, 10 Oscar nominations isn't a small thing. If I remember correctly, out of all of Scorsese's films, only The Aviator has more nominations with 11, giving us a good indicator of The Irishman's success. And I know it doesn't mean much now, seeing as though films like Roma and Marriage Story have done really well with awards, but The Irishman being a Netflix picture, once upon a time many people thought that the film would be completely shut out of the Oscars by the cinema elitist crowd, and yet look at it, 10 nominations. So let's look at the list. For the Best Picture, the nominations are Ford vs Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Woman, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. For lead actor, we have Antonio Banderas for Pain and Glory, Leonardo DiCaprio for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Adam Driver for Marriage Story, Joaquin Phoenix for Joker, and Jonathan Pryce for The Two Popes. So, interestingly, as with the Golden Globes, De Niro has not been nominated for an Oscar for his performance in The Irishman, meaning he's the only one out of the big players of The Irishman who has not been nominated. As I'll get to them, Pacino and Pesci scored nods, so did Scorsese, and even the likes of Thelma and Steven Zillane. It's a shame because I thought he was brilliant in The Irishman and did very well, playing multiple ages and playing a character who was very restrained. It would have been the perfect send-off for the 4 main players of The Irishman, Scorsese, De Niro, Pacino and Pesci, all nominated with Oscars for the film. In terms of what I've seen of the guys who are nominated, I thought Phoenix was outstanding in the Joker, very much worthy of an Academy Award, and I don't see many people complaining if he does win. DiCaprio being nominated for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood I'm a bit surprised about. He was pretty good in the film, but I didn't think he'd be nominated for an Oscar for it. I didn't think he was all that. The Best Supporting Actor list is absolutely stacked. There are some huge names in there, some real heavy hitters. Get a load of this. Tom Hanks for A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, Anthony Hopkins for The Two Popes, Al Pacino for The Irishman, Joe Pesci for The Irishman, and Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Hanks, Hopkins, Pacino, Pesci and Brad Pitt. What is this, the mid-90s? That's a stunning lineup, but only one can win, of course. I thought Brad Pitt was good in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was very charismatic. It was very much a Brad Pitt performance though. I didn't think he was that good, but he is the only actor from the list who hasn't won an Oscar yet, so maybe they'll give it to him because of that. It's really nice to see Anthony Hopkins in there. He's in his 80s now and still going strong. Al Pacino and Joe Pesci I thought were both mesmerising in The Irishman. Al Pacino, despite being almost 80 himself, brought so much energy to his role as Jimmy Hoffa. It was like seeing Pacino from the 90s. And for those who feel he was one-dimensional and simply shouting his head off, I'd advise rewatching the Frank Sheeran Appreciation Night scene and looking at just how much nuance Pacino brought to his role. Look at the way he reacts to being told by Pesci he isn't showing appreciation, or when De Niro tells him it's what it is. He was brilliant in the film and fully deserving of an Oscar. A huge obstacle to that, however, is his co-star Joe Pesci. If Pacino is brilliant in The Irishman, then how do you describe Joe Pesci in the film? Quietly unnerving and sinister at times, and like an older, gentle uncle at others. He was absolutely magnificent in the film, and he gave us a performance so different from the bombastic and wild roles he's famous for. Pesci has been off the grid for years, practically having been forced at gunpoint to do The Irishman, and then he pulls out a jaw-dropping performance and then smoothly slips back into retirement again. It's a tough choice between Pacino and Pesci, but I think if I had to choose, it would be Pesci I'd give the award to. He does so much in the film with so little, like little expressions here and there, or just the overall demeanour and vibe he gives off. Martin Scorsese was also nominated for an Oscar for the film, making it the 9th time he has either won or has been nominated. Again, it's a wonderful recognition for his work on the film, which goes above and beyond simply directing a good movie. He fought for years to get the film made, to get the financing, and then getting good performances out of all these old fogies, making a film that is so long and yet well paced, a fun gangster romp, but also a deep reflective picture. The other filmmakers who were nominated were Todd Phillips for Joker, Sam Mendes for 1917, Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. And that's a really strong list. There's no telling who will win. I'm going to put my money on Mendes or Joon-ho, even though I haven't seen their films, simply because of what I've been hearing about their movies. The other awards The Irishman nabbed nominations for were Best Adapted Screenplay, Cinematography, Film Editing, Production Design, Costume Design, and interestingly, Visual Effects, obviously for the de-aging. And it looks pretty funny being nominated amongst the likes of Avengers Endgame, The Lion King, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. It looks so out of place amongst all these blockbusters. With all of these awards though, I think it has as good of a chance of winning as any of the other films. All of these things, production design, costume design, all of these things were great. I think 1917 is pretty much the lock for cinematography though. Some of you guys who have actually seen it will know more than I do, but I'm hearing that the cinematography, made to look like the entire film is one take, is mesmerising. Plus Deakins is so overdue in Oscar, it's not even funny. And the effects will probably go to the Avengers film. A lot of the times it's a superhero flick that takes home this award. But the rest though, The Irishman has as good of a chance as any. So what do you think of the Oscar nominations? Which film do you think deserves to win the big awards? Were any films snubbed? Do you even care about the Oscars? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.